Four men walked into that Tampa courtroom on May 8, 2026, thinking their lawyers might find a crack in the case. They sat at that defense table for nearly a month. They heard the evidence. They watched the surveillance footage. They saw their own text messages put up on a projector screen in front of a jury. And when that jury came back after 8 hours of deliberating 8 hours, the four persons stood up and said the same thing 4 separate times. Guilty, 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 first-degree premeditated murder. All 4 of them. Isaiah Chance, Sean Gathright, Rashad Murphy, Davian Murphy, every single one of them. Gone. No cap, no wiggle room, no hung jury, no mistrial. The jury looked each of those men dead in the face and said, "You did it, and we know you did it, and this is done." And while all of that was going down inside that Tampa courtroom while the verdict was being read, while some of those defendants were breaking down, Foolios' mother, Sandricus Mays, was sitting there, taking it all in. The woman who buried her son on what was supposed to be his 26th birthday celebration. The woman who watched 5 people get arrested one by one over the course of months. The woman who never wavered. Not once, not publicly, not even when Davian Murphy was on the run for 6 months and nobody knew where he was. That woman sat in that courtroom and watched justice happen in real time. And she had something to say about it. Y'all need to hear this whole story, and because it ain't just about a verdict. It's about what it took to get here. It's about a mother who never stopped believing. It's about what really went down on June 23, 2024, the night Charles Jones was taken from this world. It's about 4 men who thought they were untouchable, and the moment they found out they were wrong. This is the full breakdown. Let's get into it. To understand why this verdict hit different, you gotta understand who Charles Jones was before he became Julio Foolio, and you gotta understand the world he came from. Foolio came up out of Jacksonville, Florida, specifically the 6 block set. And by the time he was in his mid-20s, he had turned himself into one of the most talked about artists to ever come out of that city. Not just because of his music, gang, because of his survival. Foolio had been through losses that would break most people. He rapped about real pain because he was living real pain. Funerals, shootings, beef that wasn't just online, it was in the streets for real. And his name blew up nationally around 2021, and a lot of it had to do with the beef. Youngin Ace, who prosecutors would later connect to rival gang ATK, Ace's top killers, dropped a song called Who I Smoke that people took as a direct diss toward Foolio and his fallen ops. Foolio fired back with everything he had. Beatbox remix, When I See You, diss for diss, track for track. The beef got personal, and it got loud on the internet, and while fans were treating it like entertainment, the reality was that this was a window into something much darker, a real documented, ongoing gang war between 6 Block on one side and ATK and 1200 on the other. This wasn't just rap beef. Prosecutors would later stand in court and say flat out, there is a real gang war going on in Jacksonville. A TK and 1200 are at war with 6 Block. It is blatant. They weren't exaggerating. Multiple people had died. The violence was documented, and the men who would eventually be convicted of killing Foolio were right in the middle of all of it. That's the foundation, fam. That's why what happened on June 23, 2024 wasn't random. It was calculated. Here's where I need y'all to pay attention, because the details of how this happened tell you everything about how premeditated this murder was. June 14, 2024, 9 days before his death, Foolio posted flyers on Instagram announcing he was going to be in Tampa celebrating his birthday, just promoting himself, just letting the city know he was pulling up. That's it. That's normal artist stuff. But prosecutors say the moment those flyers went up, the clock started ticking, because the men who would eventually pull the trigger saw those flyers and started planning. These 4 men, Chance, Gathright, Rashad Murphy, and Davian Murphy, plus a woman named Alicia Andrews, who was Chance's girlfriend.
Isaiah Chance, Alicia Andrews, Sean Gathright, Davian Murphy, and Rashard Murphy are all accused of playing a role in Jones's death and are all charged with 1 count of murder in the first degree, premeditated, with the discharge of a firearm.
Drove from Jacksonville to Tampa on June 22nd, the day before the murder. They weren't coming for a party, they weren't coming to network, they came with a mission. The prosecution put it exactly like this: a coordinated mission to eliminate Charles Jones. On the night of June 23rd, Foolio was moving around Tampa, clubs, venues, celebrating his birthday. And the whole time, according to the evidence, Chance and Andrews were following him.
Jones was in town celebrating his birthday and posted on his social media his locations several times throughout that night. Surveillance video was critical in this investigation, as suspects were seen on video following Jones from location to location,
tracking him through the city in a silver Chevrolet Cruze, while Gathright, Rashad Murphy, and Davian Murphy followed in a Chevrolet Impala. Two separate cars, coordinated movements. This wasn't two dudes catching a lucky break. This was a full surveillance operation. Foolio ended up at an Airbnb at some point during the night, but he got asked to leave because there were too many people there. His lawyer later said that's what happened. So Charles Jones and his crew had to move. They ended up at a Holiday Inn near the University of South Florida on McKinley Drive. And that's where it happened. At some point in the early morning hours of June 23, 2024, surveillance cameras caught what happened next. 5 people dressed all in black, armed, moving around the hotel parking lot, waiting. And when Foolio's car was spotted, they opened fire. Tampa Police Chief Lee Burkaw saw the footage and said at the press conference, and I'm paraphrasing here, "It looks like a movie." That's how coordinated it was. They kept shooting as the car tried to drive away. 3 other people in that car were wounded. Charles Jones, Julio Foolio, did not survive. He was 26 years old. It was supposed to be his birthday.
In the early morning hours of Sunday, June 23rd, Jacksonville rapper Charles Jones arrived at Teaser's Gentlemen's Club in Tampa for a paid performance.
He's the gentleman wearing the red beanie hat.
That's Tampa Police Homicide Detective Juan Ramos identifying the rapper, known as Julio Foolio, in new surveillance video from the club's parking lot. Suspects Alicia Andrews, Isaiah Chance, and Sean Gathright watched this video in court Thursday, too. All 3 faced charges in Jones's death in what investigators say was an ongoing rival gang war. After leaving Teasers, the rapper went down the street to Truth 18 nightclub for an after party, posting on social media in live time.
This is the video here from his Instagram.
Surveillance video from outside that club shows how 2 suspect vehicles continued to follow Jones, just as they did at Teasers, and eventually to the Home 2 suites near USF.
They're approaching the victim's position on foot.
Video from the hotel and a parked Tesla show 3 shooters firing several shots at the vehicle Jones was riding in, killing him.
Within 1 month of the murder, law enforcement moved. In July 2024, Jacksonville Sheriff's Office held a press conference and announced the arrests of Sean Gathright, Alicia Andrews, and Isaiah Chance, all facing first-degree murder charges.
Chance, Andrews, and Gathright were arrested over the weekend in Jacksonville.
At the same press conference, they named Rashad Murphy and Davian Murphy as wanted men. Rashad was arrested less than 24 hours after that press conference. But Davian? Davian Murphy went on the run. 6 months, fam. 6 whole months. He was out there somewhere while the case was building, while the family was waiting, while the streets were watching. That chapter didn't close until January 2025, when JSO's SWAT team and the gang unit, working alongside the U.S. Marshals Service, tracked Davion down to an apartment on LaBelle Street in Jacksonville and brought him in.
Davion Murphy and Rashard Murphy are still fugitives of justice, and we are working closely with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office and the U.S. Marshals to apprehend them.
That's when Foolio's mother, Sandricus Mays, spoke publicly. She released a statement that Action News Jax obtained, and she said, "I'm thankful for the capture of 5 suspects that had involvement with the murder of my son, Charles Jones II. I never once did not believe that those responsible wouldn't be caught." She called herself forever grateful. But notice what she didn't do. She didn't celebrate in a reckless way. She didn't say anything disrespectful. She was firm. She was thankful. And she made it clear. She knew from the start they were going to get caught. She never doubted it. That's a mother who held it together while the whole world was watching. That's a woman who had faith in something when she had every reason not to. Before the main event, before the 4 men stood trial, there was Alicia Andrews, and her trial told you a lot about how this whole case was going to unfold. Andrews was tried separately in October 2025. The prosecution argued that she was the lookout, the one who helped track Foolio's movements through Tampa that night. She booked the Airbnb in Tampa. That's right, the same Airbnb that Foolio ended up at before he got kicked out. The booking was in her name. Text messages shown in court placed her coordinating with Chance about where Jones was. Gathwright's girlfriend was also used to get intelligence about Foolio's location at a nightclub, multiple levels of surveillance. The defense argued she wasn't in a gang, had limited knowledge of the actual plot, and wasn't present when the weapons were being packed. They painted her as someone who got pulled into something by her boyfriend. The jury split the difference. They found her guilty, but on the lesser charge of manslaughter, not first-degree murder. Not guilty on the conspiracy charge. Now here's where it gets messy. Andrews tried to get her sentencing delayed. Filed a motion claiming the judge, Michelle Cisco, was biased against her defense. She was supposed to be sentenced in December 2025. That got kicked. Her lawyers appealed. Florida's 2nd District Court of Appeals actually sided with her and removed Judge Cisco from her sentencing. A new judge, Kimberly Fernandez, was assigned in January 2026. As of the time of writing this, Andrews still hasn't been sentenced. But here's what the Andrews trial really did. It set the stage. It confirmed the prosecution's theory in a courtroom. It established the roadmap. So when the 4 men went to trial in April 2026, the state already had a trial run. They knew what worked. They knew what the defense was going to argue, and they came ready. April 22nd, 2026, the trial starts. And right off the top, it got wild. Opening day, Davion Murphy, one of the defendants, one of the alleged shooters, was caught on camera appearing to laugh while the prosecution was giving their opening statement, breaking down how Foolio was hunted, tracked, and ambushed. And this man had a smirk on his face. The internet went crazy. People called it reprehensible. One YouTube comment on the Law and Crime stream called it an attempt to project toughness before a long prison sentence. Whatever the reason, it was not a good look, and people did not forget it. Then you had another moment during the trial. Sean Gathright was caught on surveillance video inside a police interrogation room pacing around with a blanket on the table, suggesting he'd been sitting in there a while, and then climbing up on the table trying to get through the ceiling tiles to escape. Not exactly the behavior of an innocent man trying to stay calm, gang. Now let's talk about the evidence, because this is where the prosecution built their case brick by brick. The state put up cell phone data showing the defendants' movements from Jacksonville to Tampa the day before the murder. They put up surveillance footage mapping the 2 cars, the Cruise and the Impala, following Foolio to multiple locations across Tampa throughout that night. They showed 31 9mm shell casings recovered from the scene, along with projectile fragments, ballistic analysis linking the gunfire to 3 shooters, consistent with Gathright, Rashad Murphy, and Davion Murphy being the ones who pulled triggers while Chance and Andrews handled the surveillance operation. There was a Tesla in the hotel parking lot. Its built-in Sentry Mode camera, which records automatically when motion is detected around the vehicle, captured footage. A rifle was fired so close to this Tesla that the concussion from the blast triggered the car's alarm. Let that sink in. These men came with rifles they had modified so that rifle shell casings wouldn't be left at the scene. They thought about that in advance. They planned that detail. After the murder, the state showed Rashad Murphy posting on Instagram celebratory posts, a photo referencing Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, the GOAT, with laughing emojis, a post that read, "Hate me kindly." The prosecutor told the jury, and I'm paraphrasing, "There is nothing fun about a gang war." And on June 23, 2024, that war spilled into Tampa. The prosecution also played music videos. A video called Foolio Dead was released by a rival gang just days after the shooting. They used that as evidence of motive and mindset. The defense came with their rebuttals. And to be fair, fam, let me lay it out, because some of these arguments weren't nothing. Gathright's lawyer argued that his client's phone was never collected into evidence, so everything the prosecution had was based on cell tower records, which defense said can be unreliable. He argued the rifle found at Gathright's home, the one he shares with his mother, didn't match the shape of the rifle visible in the surveillance footage. He compared Gathright to a puzzle piece that doesn't fit. He also noted that JSO Detective Ramos testified they didn't even know who Sean Gathright was until Tampa police surfaced his name. Chance's attorney argued that his client being in Tampa wasn't proof he participated in a murder. Just being in a city isn't a crime. He said Chance didn't qualify as a documented gang member by legal standards. No tattoos, not formally documented. He said the state could only prove Chance was in the car with Andrews, with an unknown driver. Rashad Murphy's lawyer said his client's cell phone data didn't show him traveling from Jacksonville to Tampa at the relevant time. He said Rashad originally lied about being in Tampa, not because he was guilty, but because he was afraid of being associated with the shooting, because the car used in the surveillance operation was connected to his account. He thought the Cruise was being used to transport items to his incarcerated brother, not to track and kill someone. These weren't weak arguments on paper. Circumstantial evidence cases are hard. Defense attorneys are supposed to poke holes, and they poked some, but the jury wasn't buying it. 8 hours of deliberation. That's actually not that long for a month-long capital murder trial with 4 defendants. They came back. They convicted. All 4. First-degree murder. No exceptions. May 8, 2026. After 7+ hours of deliberations, the jury returned. Isaiah Chance, guilty first-degree premeditated murder. Sean Gathright, guilty first-degree premeditated murder. Rashad Murphy, guilty first-degree premeditated murder. Davion Murphy, guilty first-degree premeditated murder. All 4 also convicted on conspiracy charges. Rashad, Davion, and Gathright additionally found guilty on lesser-included charges. And here's the moment that the internet won't stop talking about, fam. Because contrast this with Davion Murphy laughing in court at the start of the trial. When that verdict came in, one of these defendants was crying. The energy in that courtroom on day 1 and the energy on verdict day were 2 completely different things. Coming in, some of these men had that tough energy, like they thought they were going to walk, or at least like they weren't showing any weakness. But when those 12 jurors came back and that 4-person said guilty over and over again, when the reality set in that they're not going home, they might never go home, that tough face cracked. Because this isn't just a conviction, gang. This is a capital murder case. In Florida, the penalty phase starts immediately. The same jury that just found them guilty will now decide whether these men live the rest of their lives in prison, or whether they get the death penalty. Under Florida law, it doesn't even require a unanimous jury to recommend death. 8 out of 12 is enough. 8 out of 12 jurors voting to recommend death is enough for the judge to impose it. Let that register. These 4 men are now looking down the barrel of either dying in prison or being executed by the state of Florida. That's not hyperbole. That is literally the next step in this process. State Attorney Susie Lopez spoke after the verdict. She said, "These defendants brought a gang war from Jacksonville into Hillsborough County, and their violence ends here. This guilty verdict delivers accountability and justice for Charles Jones's family, but it also sends a clear message that this community will not tolerate ruthless and calculated violence." Real talk. That statement hits different when you think about what this trial really was. This wasn't just about one murder, this was a message. A whole Jacksonville gang war spilled into Tampa and killed a 26-year-old on his birthday in front of witnesses in a hotel parking lot near a university. And the state of Florida spent 2 years building the case, running 2 separate trials, and came out of it with 5 convictions. 1 manslaughter, 4 first-degree murders. They did not miss. Now let's bring it back to where this story lives for real. Because the verdict, the evidence, the defendants, all of that matters. But at the center of this story is a mother. Sandricus Mays didn't just lose a son. She lost him on what was supposed to be a celebration. She lost him because her son posted on Instagram that he was coming to Tampa. She lost him because the people who wanted him dead were watching his social media. She lost him in a hotel parking lot in a city that wasn't even his home. And through all of it, the months of arrests, the wait for Davion to be caught, the Andrews trial in October 2025, and then this month-long capital murder trial, she held it together publicly. She never wavered. When Davion finally got arrested back in January 2025, she said she was forever grateful, and she said she never once doubted that the people responsible would be found. That's a woman with conviction. That's a mother who turned her grief into something immovable. The fact that this verdict came down, all 4 all guilty first-degree murder, that's the answer to everything she's been waiting for since June 23, 2024. It doesn't bring Charles back, nothing does that, but accountability in a court of law with the possibility that the people who planned and executed her son's murder could face the death penalty, that's not nothing. That's everything the legal system can offer. And it's worth saying this plainly. Not every family of a murder victim gets here. Some cases go cold. Some cases get acquittals. Some cases drag on for decades with no resolution. The fact that all 5 suspects in Foolios' murder, 5, have now been convicted within 2 years of his death, that's a rarity. That speaks to the quality of the investigation. That speaks to the witnesses who came forward. That speaks to the digital evidence trail these men left behind, posting on social media, leaving text messages, using identifiable vehicles on camera after camera after camera. They thought they were untouchable. The jury said otherwise. Here's where I need y'all to zoom out with me for a second, because this case is bigger than Foolio. It's bigger than Jacksonville. It's bigger than one gang war. This trial established something that courts are still wrestling with all over the country: rap music and social media as evidence. The prosecution played drill rap videos from rival gangs in front of that jury. They analyzed lyrics. They showed Instagram posts. They used music videos as evidence of motive and celebration of violence. The defense pushed back on it, hard. Defense attorneys said that drill rap is often about trolling, disrespect, and clout, not actual confessions. That just because someone raps about a killing doesn't mean they committed it. One detective even acknowledged on cross-examination that his conclusions about lyrics were somewhat interpretive. This is a real debate happening in courts right now, fam. Multiple cases across the country have seen rap lyrics used as evidence, and there are real concerns about whether that's a fair practice, because a lot of creative expression gets criminalized, and the line between art and confession is not always clear. The jury in this case seemed to weigh everything together rather than treating the lyrics alone as proof. But the fact that those videos were played in a death penalty case tells you where the law is moving. And then there's the social media piece. Foolio announced his Tampa trip on Instagram. His killers tracked him on Instagram. After his death, one of the defendants posted celebratory content on Instagram. The entire digital footprint of this crime, from the planning to the aftermath, lived on people's phones and social media accounts. And prosecutors followed that trail all the way to a first-degree murder conviction. This is the new reality, gang. The streets and the internet are the same street now. And what you put online doesn't disappear just because you want it to. The penalty phase was scheduled to begin Monday, May 11, 2026, and run through Friday. The same 12 jurors who just convicted these 4 men will now hear arguments about whether they should live or die. Prosecutors will present aggravating factors: the premeditated, coordinated nature of the attack, the multiple victims, the fact that this was carried out as part of organized gang activity. Defense attorneys will present mitigating factors: personal history, upbringing, mental health, whatever they can find that humanizes these men in front of a jury that just found them guilty of murder. And then those jurors will deliberate again, and they'll decide. Under Florida law, if at least 8 jurors recommend death, the judge can impose the death penalty. If fewer than 8 recommend death, it becomes a life sentence. The judge still has discretion, but the jury's recommendation carries serious weight. For Alicia Andrews, who was convicted of manslaughter back in October 2025, she's still waiting on sentencing after successfully getting the original judge removed from her case. A new judge is overseeing it. Manslaughter in Florida carries up to 15 years. Her situation is still unresolved. But for the 4 men who actually carried out this murder, resolution is coming. One way or another, they are done. And Foolio's mother, the woman who said from the beginning that she never doubted they'd be caught, gets to sit with that truth. Real recognize real, fam. And the real here is this: Charles Jones built a career out of telling the truth about where he came from. He rapped about the losses. He rapped about the beefs. He rapped about survival and pain and loyalty. And when his life was taken in that Tampa parking lot on his 26th birthday, the people who loved him could have fallen apart. They didn't. His mother stood firm. Law enforcement worked the case. 2 separate trials, 5 convictions. And now those 4 men sit in a Tampa courtroom facing the possibility that the state of Florida is going to take their lives the way they took his. I'm not going to tell y'all how to feel about the death penalty. That's a bigger conversation for another day. What I will say is this: when you plan a murder 2 weeks in advance, when you track a man across the city all night, when you coordinate 2 vehicles and multiple shooters, when you modify your rifles so there's no shell casings left at the scene, when you post celebration content on Instagram the same night, you made your choices clear. The jury saw those choices, and they made their choice too. Guilty. 4 times. No exceptions. To Foolio's mother, Sandricus Mays, I see you, fam. You held it down for your son the way a mother should. And to Foolio himself, Charles Jones II, your music still lives. Your city still knows your name. And the people who did this to you are never coming home. That's the real tea. Drop a comment below. Y'all think they get the death penalty or life? Let me know. And if you ain't subscribed yet, what are you doing? We cover this stuff with no filter and full respect. Like, subscribe, hit the bell, you already know what it is. Peace.